When I was 12, my family lived in a rental house near our soda dealership. Most days I was home alone. The ground floor had been converted into a storage area, stacked with boxes and soda cases, leaving almost no space to move around. Because of this, my sister and I mostly stayed on the second floor, each in our own room. The staircase leading down faced a window that originally overlooked a veranda, but since the ground floor had turned into a stockroom, the veranda outside that window was now packed tightly with empty soda cases and boxes, stacked so high you could barely see beyond them. Only one person could squeeze through when the main door to the terrace was open, just enough space for workers to keep piling up the empties. One morning, I was hurrying downstairs to head out the back door. As usual, I grabbed the stair railing to swing my body left toward the kitchen and the exit, but something stopped me mid-motion. Through the window at the base of the stairs, through the murky, cluttered view of that terrace, I saw someone standing outside. At first, my eyes were drawn to their shirt. It looked familiar, too familiar. It was the exact same shirt I was wearing. I froze, staring at the figure. My gaze locked on their chest. Something didn't feel right, but I couldn't look away. Then slowly, I raised my eyes to their face, and that's when I saw it. It was me. Same shirt, same hair, same face, but not the same expression. This version of me was staring downward with a disturbing smile on their face. A smile I didn't recognize, one that didn't belong to me. It felt wrong, twisted in a way that made my skin crawl. I stood there, completely frozen, as this other me slowly began to lift their head, like it was about to meet my gaze. Panic surged through me. I didn't want our eyes to meet. I didn't want to see what was behind that smile. Before it could look at me, I bolted. I ran straight out the back door and found my sister, telling her everything that had just happened. Of course, she didn't believe me. She said it was probably just a reflection in the window, or maybe I imagined the whole thing. But I know what I saw. It wasn't a reflection. It moved differently. It smiled in a way I never have, and it was waiting to look me in the eyes. Even now, as an adult, long after we moved out of that house, I still think about that moment. I still remember that smile, and sometimes I still see it in my dreams. Hello, my name is Heather, and this story took place a few years ago. I often stayed home alone for a couple of hours, but this particular night my parents were out of town for the weekend, and it was the first time I had to sleep alone with no one else in the house. This didn't bother me though, because I had just finished a stressful report for school that took a whole week, and I was ready to relax. My parents left at around 8 p.m. that night, and I decided to put a movie on and eat some pizza. It started raining heavily out of nowhere, and when this happened, my parents always told me to go outside and pull the pool cover out and over the pool. This was because if we didn't, the pool would overflow. Anyway, I was kind of nervous to go do it because it had already gotten dark outside, and behind my house was a forest where wild animals often came out at night. I decided to wait the rain out to see if it would stop, but after 20 minutes, it didn't. I sighed, then decided to put my fear aside and go to the backyard. I turned on all the deck lights and walked toward the pool. That's when I noticed something weird. The pool was already halfway covered. I was confused. It had only started raining 20 minutes ago, and I didn't think it was covered when my parents left, so why was it covered now? I tried to convince myself it was the wind, but deep down, I knew it couldn't have been. The cover has to be manually adjusted. Still not convinced it was the wind, I approached the pool with caution and continued to cover it. Then suddenly, I heard a noise. It wasn't anything crazy, nothing more than a branch swaying in the wind, but I was already on edge, so I noticed it right away. As I looked into the darkness of the trees, that's when I noticed a flash of light. It was very quick, like whoever was holding the flashlight realized I was looking. This made me extremely nervous, so I quickly ran back inside, locked the doors, and went to my room. Since my room faced the backyard, I made sure to keep the deck lights on so I could look through my window and see if anyone was there. I began trying to calm my mind down, so I started knitting in my room while periodically checking my window to see if there was any movement. After about an hour, My mind calmed down and I stopped checking as much. Then, just one last time, I looked out of my window and saw that the pool cover had come off again. This time, it did look like the wind could have pushed it backward, so I went outside once again and covered it. The rainstorm had slowed down, so I knew this was probably the last time I had to do it. After a couple of hours, I decided it was time for bed. I double-checked all the locks and made sure the alarm system was on. If you're wondering why I didn't turn the alarm on before, it's because it's an automatic system that turns on every night at 11 p.m. I turned off all the deck lights except one, the motion sensor light. At this point, my parents had called to check in, but I didn't want to worry them, so I just told them that everything was okay, which technically it was. There had been no movement in the forest so far. Then I went to sleep. I woke up at around 2 a.m. because the motion sensor light turned on. I slowly got up from my bed and peeked out my window, which was right above it. As my vision adjusted, to my confusion, I noticed the pool cover was off again. Was this some kind of sick joke? Did whoever was doing this just want to keep me coming outside? I looked into the distance, but saw no lights or movement. I went outside again, this time with a knife, and walked up to the pool to cover it. That's when I noticed it. To my horror, there was someone inside my pool. For context, even with the cover on, there was still enough room for someone to comfortably breathe. They were dressed in all black, with a hoodie on in the farthest corner of the pool. I was in shock. Then suddenly, they started swimming extremely fast toward the ladder, which was right in front of me. And when I say fast, I mean unnaturally fast. I screamed, stupidly dropped my knife, and ran inside. As I was locking the door, the person, who I now realized was a man, ran up to the glass sliding doors and started banging on them with the knife. I was horrified. I called the police right away and hid in my bathroom until they arrived. My parents came home shortly after and informed me they had actually covered the pool completely before they left. So the man had been lurking in my backyard for even longer than I had thought. The police caught the man and arrested him. They later informed my family that the man was homeless and had previously been a professional swimmer who had won a lot of medals. This made sense considering how fast he swam. Anyway, this happened to me a few years ago, and I still can't look at pools the same. Even now, when I recall the moment that man started swimming toward me at full speed, I still get goosebumps. I want to share an experience that happened about 8 months ago. My name is Aishwarya, and I study computer science at a university. I can't say the name, but it's located in India. My college is near a reserved forest area, and I stay in a campus hostel. The building has 5 floors, and I live on the 4th floor. Our room has 4 beds, and I share it with 3 other friends. Every night after dinner, we usually sit by the window and gossip. Just normal things like boys, fashion, and new trends. From our window, we can see a beautiful lake behind the hostel. It became our routine. We'd sit there, talk, and admire the view of nature, sometimes staying up until 2 in the morning. But one night was different. I had a headache, so I went to sleep early, around 10. One of my friends, Sid, had been fighting with her boyfriend, so she wasn't in the mood to talk either and went to bed early too. The other 2 stayed up by the window like usual. At some point in the night, I think around 1 in the morning, my friend Pravalika suddenly woke me up. She was shaking, terrified. I asked her what was wrong, but she couldn't even speak. She just pointed toward the window. I got up quietly and walked over. Sid and my other friend Jesse were already there, frozen, staring outside. When I looked out the window, my jaw dropped. At first, I couldn't even process what I was seeing. It didn't feel real. Down near the lake, there were 2 men, half naked, dancing around a fire. Around them were more people. I couldn't tell how many. Some were standing still, others looked like they were praying. We couldn't see everything clearly, but one thing was certain. They were performing some kind of ritual, and it wasn't just any night, it was a new moon. Where I'm from, people say that on new moon nights, devil worshippers perform rituals, sometimes even sacrifices, to impress the devil. All 4 of us stood there, completely frozen, staring out the window. It was the first time we had ever seen something like that. I felt this deep sense of unease. So I said, "Let's not watch this. Let's just go to sleep." One of my friends quickly recorded a short video before we turned away. The next day, we showed it to a few of our other friends. Everyone was shocked. But that wasn't the worst part. Later that day, we heard that a dead body had been found floating in the lake, a boy from our college. We were completely speechless. The police investigation was closed within a few weeks. They ruled it as suicide, but there was no note, no explanation, nothing. That's when the rumors started. Some people said the boy was involved with a cult. Others said he was trying to expose them. And when they found out, they killed him. No one knows the truth. Maybe it was just a rumor, or maybe it wasn't. But sometimes I still think about that night, and I wonder if I hadn't said, "Let's sleep," would we have seen more? Or maybe something we were never meant to see. This happened a few months ago. I don't remember the exact date, but it was January. This took place in the Philippines. My mother was the one who told me this story because I was completely unaware of it, and my sister refused to talk about it, so my mom told me instead. My sister is 19 years old, and she's quite short for her age. She's a college student, but she also works part-time at McDonald's, which is about 20 minutes away from our house, or 30 minutes with traffic. This happened on a Sunday night, around 10 p.m. It was the end of her shift. She cleaned up what she could and said goodbye to her coworkers before heading out. Her car was parked near the exit. My parents had bought her a car the year before, for her 18th birthday, because they were worried about her. She's a working student, and with all the reports of kidnappings and murders in the Philippines, they didn't want her commuting late at night. That night, she was exhausted. She had been dozing off during her shift and just wanted to get home and rest. But the moment she got into her car, she smelled something foul, something really foul. She described it as smelling like a homeless person had taken a dump inside. She immediately turned on the AC to clear the smell, and it worked. But something felt off. Her car was always clean, and it even had a cover. There was no reason it should smell like that. Still, she brushed it off. She was too tired to think about it. All she wanted was to go home. While driving, she kept drifting in and out of sleep. There was no traffic, which made it even more dangerous. So she decided to connect her phone to the car and play music, just to stay awake. But it didn't help. At some point, she dozed off again, and that's when it happened. She lost control of the car and crashed badly. When she regained awareness, everything was upside down. Her car had flipped. She couldn't feel anything, either from her injuries or from the shock. She was having a full-blown panic attack. She tried to unbuckle herself, but people from nearby houses rushed over to help. They managed to pull her out of the car. An ambulance arrived shortly after and took her to the hospital. And then she lost consciousness. She woke up around 2 a.m. My parents were sitting beside her bed. There was also a police officer in the room. He had helped her at the scene, and now he was there to ask her a few questions. At first, everything seemed normal. Then he asked her something that made her uneasy.
"Were you alone in the car?"
My sister frowned. "Yes? Why?" The officer hesitated. He had this look on his face, like he was shocked, but trying not to show it. Then he said something that made her heart drop.
"We found a homeless man in your back seat."
Silence filled the room. The officer continued.
"He had a knife on him, and during the crash, it ended up impaling him."
My sister couldn't speak. Her mind went blank. The officer explained that the man had been hiding under the back seat the entire time, listening, waiting. Because of her condition, the officer eventually stopped and left the room, nodding to my parents. My parents immediately hugged her. They thought they had almost lost her. The man was also taken to the hospital, but he didn't survive. He had been found too late. We're just grateful that my sister made it out alive. But even now, months later, she refuses to go out at night anymore. I'm 18 years old and I had just graduated high school. This happened on June 28, 2025. My mom always told me that no matter what, I should keep the door locked, always. That night, I was home alone. My parents had gone to our cabin, so it was just me, my 3 cats, and my dog. It was around 1 a.m. I was in the kitchen making food, on FaceTime with my best friend, just talking about basketball, like we always do. At one point, I unlocked the door to let my dog out to pee. But before I even got the chance to let him out, someone came running into the house. A guy my dad knew, someone who lived in the house behind ours. He came barging in. He was about 6 feet tall, dark hair, and kind of buff. At first, I thought it was just one of my dad's friends looking for him. But then, he sat down on the couch and just stared at me. It was a very awkward couple of minutes. His phone flashlight was on, pointed loosely around the room. I couldn't really make out what he was saying into his phone, but I caught a few words. "You're supposed to be on my side. You're disgusting." Then he hung up, and that's when things got worse. He started walking up and down the stairs, going upstairs, then down into the basement, over and over again. I tried talking to him multiple times. He just stared at me and kept moving. No response, nothing. Finally, I said, "Hey, my mom and dad aren't home. You need to leave." He looked at me and said, "No." Then he started walking upstairs again. I raised my voice. "Hey, you're not supposed to be up there. Can you please leave?" Nothing. No reaction. At that point, I could tell he had definitely been drinking. But it felt like more than that, the way he was acting. It was like he wasn't even in this world, completely unresponsive. That's when I started to get really freaked out. My nan lives next door, but she wasn't home either, so I called my mom. I put her on speaker just so she could hear what was happening. I even tried getting her to talk to him. That's when he suddenly grabbed my phone. He tried to say something into it, and that's when my heart dropped. He hung up, and then he started making these weird sounds. I stayed calm because I knew one wrong move and things could get bad fast. About 30 minutes later, I managed to get him outside. The second he stepped out, I ran to the door and locked it. He immediately started banging on it, screaming like a maniac. For about 5 minutes straight, he was just pounding on the door and yelling. Then I saw him start moving toward the side of the house, toward the basement entrance. I ran, faster than I ever have in my life, just to make sure he couldn't get back in. I got to the door and locked it right as he got there. He just stood at the door, staring at me, screaming. Eventually, he walked away, still yelling under his breath. That was the last time I saw him. Later, I found out he was arrested around 2 a.m., and I wasn't the only one he had done this to that night. One thing I know for sure now, never leave your door unlocked, even for a second, because it only takes one moment to end up in a situation like that. This is a story about a pencil, one that left me with trauma I'll probably carry for the rest of my life. I'm still trying to recover from what happened, and I felt like I needed to share this with someone. I don't even know where to begin. We moved not too long ago. The previous apartment building was at least 20 years old, and honestly, it was so run down it almost felt abandoned. But despite how old it was, nothing truly scary had ever happened there. After we moved, everyone was excited for a fresh start. The new place wasn't that far from our old apartment, but the moment we stepped inside, something immediately stood out. There were statues everywhere, all kinds, different shapes, different sizes. Looking back, I probably should have realized something was off right then, but my mom and I just laughed it off, like it was nothing. We started moving our things in, and for the first few days, everything seemed completely fine. Then, a few days later, things changed. I started hearing something strange at night. It sounded like someone writing with a pencil. At first, I couldn't tell where it was coming from, whether it was my parents' room or the apartment below us. I didn't think much of it, but the sound kept getting louder. Eventually, I got up and went to check my parents' room, but they were already asleep. That's when I felt this chill run down my spine. I just stood there, frozen. I tried to go back to bed, but the sound didn't stop. It kept repeating, almost like a rhythm, like a song. I opened the window to see if someone was outside. We lived on the second floor, but there was no one there. I remember whispering to myself, "Where the hell is that coming from?" Eventually, I tried to ignore it and forced myself to sleep, but even after several days, the same sound kept coming back, so I finally told my parents. They contacted the landlord, and what he told us made my blood run cold. He said that no one had lived in that apartment since an incident where a young girl was killed after her mother stabbed her in the eye with a pencil. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. We moved out not long after that, but I know I'll never forget what happened there. This happened last month. I couldn't remember the exact date, but I'm sure it was recent, around the time we had no classes, so I was usually at home. For context, I'm a 14-year-old girl, about 5'1" in height, turning 15 years old this year. I live in a secluded place, with no more than around 2,000 people. It's usually very quiet, so I never expected something like this to happen. There are 5 people in my family, not including my niece and my brother-in-law. There's my mom, my dad, and my 2 older sisters. As I mentioned, I have a niece, my older sister's daughter, and her boyfriend also lives with us. My older sister is also 6 months pregnant with my second niece. Now on to the story. This happened the day my oldest sister got home from college, since she had just finished her semester and was taking a break due to her pregnancy. It all happened at our house. Our house is really small. We have a little patio in front before you enter the main house. When you walk in, you immediately see the living area, where everything is kind of placed together, the TV and drawers all next to each other. Next to the TV is my oldest sister's room. Beside that is my other sister's room. And right next to that is my room, which is closest to the main door and has a window facing the patio. That night was like any other. My mom and dad weren't home at the time. I don't remember why. So it was just me, my sisters, my brother-in-law, and my niece at home. As usual, around 10 p.m., everyone turned off the lights and went to bed. I have severe insomnia, so I usually don't sleep until around 3 or 4 a.m. That night, I was just doing my usual thing, either playing Roblox or watching something. Around 2 a.m., I heard something outside. I forgot to mention that right beside our house, we have a billiards table, and that's where we keep the gallons of water we sell. I heard the gallons bumping into each other. At first, I assumed it was just my dogs, or maybe the puppies. Then, I heard something else. It sounded like the small door on the patio slowly opening. That didn't make sense, because I was sure I had locked it. I didn't know if I should look or not, but since my window faced the patio, I decided to take a quick peek. That's when my blood ran cold. There was someone outside, trying to pick the lock on our main door. I was terrified. I quietly stepped out of my room, since it was right beside the door, and went to knock on my sister's door to wake up my brother-in-law. He's a big guy, around 6 foot and well built. When he opened the door, I told him someone was trying to break in. At first, he didn't believe me, so I told him to look through my window. When he did, he saw it. He immediately told me to get my sister to call the police. Then he went to the kitchen and grabbed my dad's machete. He was ready to fight, but he didn't open the door. Instead, he stood to the side of it, positioning himself where the door would swing open, hiding from whoever was outside. By this point, my sister had already called the police. They said it would take around 20 minutes to get to us, since we lived in such a secluded area. My brother-in-law told me to stay in the room with my sister. Then, it happened. The man finally picked the lock and slowly opened the door. The moment he stepped inside, my brother-in-law tackled him to the ground. While he pinned him down, me and my sisters ran out to see what was happening. We turned on the lights and saw a man we didn't recognize. Not long after that, the police arrived and took him away. My parents came home shortly after. During questioning, the man claimed he was just a simple robber trying to break in, but I don't believe that. There were plenty of other houses nearby that would have been easier targets. So why choose ours? Let's just say he's now serving time in prison, and I hope he never gets out. I ran a small art studio in Oregon. It wasn't anything special, just a quiet space above a row of shops where I mostly taught kids and beginners. Up until then, nothing unusual had ever happened, at least, not until I got that email. One night, I opened a message from someone asking for private lessons. His name was Evan, a guy in his mid-20s. A few days later, he came in for his first lesson. He told me he was a cook and that he had never really drawn before, so I decided to start him off with some basic exercises. I asked him what he wanted to draw the most. He pulled out his phone, showed me a picture of a woman, and said, "I want to draw myself eating her." The moment he said that, I felt a wave of nausea hit me. Maybe it sounds ridiculous, but it wasn't what he said. It was how he said it. The way he looked at me, his tone, his voice. Something about him made my stomach turn instantly. I didn't know what to say. It was just the two of us in the studio, and I realized right away something was seriously wrong with him. I tried to stay calm and said,
"You're here to actually learn how to draw, right?"
He nodded. "Of course. I need to get my face and her face exactly right, as realistic as possible." That was enough for me. I told him I couldn't teach him and asked him to leave. He looked confused, almost offended, and started arguing with me, but after a while, he finally left. I had a pounding headache, and I ended up closing the studio early that day. A few days later, when I came in, I saw a piece of paper lying in front of the door. I picked it up. There was a drawing on it. It was horrifying. A man was tearing into a woman's foot, eating it. The level of detail was disturbing. Exposed bone, blood, everything rendered with unsettling precision. But what shocked me the most was the face of the man in the drawing. It was him, Evan, and then I felt dizzy because the woman in the drawing was me. I dropped the paper and screamed. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. He had taken my photo from online and recreated my face perfectly. What made it even worse was how detailed it was. The thought of him spending hours on it, carefully drawing every part, made my skin crawl. I grabbed my phone to call the police, but my hands were shaking so badly. And at the same time, I wasn't even sure if this was something he could actually be charged for. Either way, the police came. After hearing what happened, they went to see Evan and gave him a serious warning. Thankfully, he never came back to my studio. But that wasn't the end of it. A few months later, I got an email. Without thinking, I opened it and immediately screamed. There was an image attached. It was a drawing of Evan sitting at a table, eating, and on the table was my head. The detail was unbelievable, like it had been done by someone who studied human anatomy extensively. Every muscle, every layer of skin, every vein, drawn in disturbing precision. And underneath it, there was a message. "This is what I always dream about. When I draw things like this and look at them, I feel the happiest and most alive. Evan." I blocked his email immediately and deleted it, but the damage was already done. That experience stayed with me. I ended up deleting everything about me online and moving my studio. Over time, I managed to get back to a normal life. I still teach art, but even now, I still have nightmares. I tried to understand why he was like that, reading about psychology, looking for some kind of explanation, but I never found a clear answer. The only thing I could come up with was that he had some kind of twisted obsession. In psychiatry, it's called paraphilia. Maybe he had urges he couldn't act on in real life, so he expressed them through his drawings. Sometimes, I wonder if he's still out there, doing the same thing. As for me, I just try not to think about him anymore and live my life in peace. So in the middle of the night, I accidentally heard my mom open the front door, and I heard her say,
"I haven't seen you in a long time. Come in and sit."
My mom kept talking, but the problem was that it sounded like she was speaking to someone in front of her. However, there were moments when my mom went quiet and no one responded. I asked myself, is my mom talking on the phone? But if she were on the phone, I would have only heard her voice. I had clearly heard the door open. So I asked myself again, who is my mom talking to? That night, I woke up and left my room, intending to see who she was talking to. I went out and immediately entered the kitchen, pretending I needed to use the bathroom. I opened the door and saw my mom talking to someone, but I couldn't see who it was because they were hidden behind a wall, so I could only see my mom. The moment I stepped out, I saw my mom deep in conversation, but there was no one visible in the living room. I stood there for a brief second, completely shocked. Then my mom said,
Oh, and this is my daughter. She's grown so much. Go and introduce yourself.
I was confused and terrified. I told my mom I needed to use the bathroom because I really had to pee. Then I ran inside and locked the door. I stayed there for about 5 minutes when I heard my mom say,
All right, see you again.
followed by the sound of the door closing. When I opened the bathroom door, I saw that my mom had already gone to bed, so I went straight back to my room. A few days later, I asked my mom about that night, about the person she was talking to. My mom looked confused and said,
What are you talking about?
I tried to remind her, but she insisted it never happened. To this day, my mom has no memory of opening the door for anyone. When I was a kid, I lived in an apartment with my parents and my 2 older brothers. There was a movie theater right near our place, and one of my dad's friends worked there, so we went pretty often. Every time we went, I'd run around all over the place. If I got bored, I'd even just walk home by myself. My mom used to get really annoyed about it, but eventually, she just got used to it. One day, we went to the theater again, and like always, I wandered off and lost track of my mom. After a while, I decided to sneak into one of the theaters. The place was pretty old and kind of run down, so they only showed a few movies, and I'd already seen all of them. I was bored out of my mind. At some point, I ended up dozing off in one of the seats. When I woke up, the theater was completely dark. I was a little confused at first, but I could faintly make out what looked like silhouettes of people's heads down below. So I assumed the power had gone out and didn't think much of it. I was sitting all the way in the back row, so I had a clear view of everything below me. But the moment I stood up and started walking down the steps, I realized something was wrong. The entire theater was empty. I froze for a second, then called out, "Hello? Is anyone here?" No answer, just silence. That's when it hit me. I was alone, trapped inside a pitch-black theater. My heart started pounding as I reached out in the dark, feeling around for the exit. I stumbled a few times, bumping into seats and nearly falling down. But eventually, I found the door. Relief hit me for about half a second. Then I realized it was locked. That's when the panic really set in. I started banging on the door, yelling as loud as I could, hoping someone outside would hear me. For a few seconds, there was nothing. Then, I heard footsteps. They were coming from somewhere above the seats, behind me. I wasn't alone. The footsteps turned into what sounded like children laughing, and then, just as suddenly, it stopped. That's when I realized the footsteps were getting closer, moving down the rows, toward me. As the sound got louder, I completely lost it. I started screaming and pounding on the door even harder. I even heard my dog barking outside. I shouted for her, calling her name, hoping for anything. And then, for some reason, I felt this overwhelming urge to turn around. So I did, and I swear to God, I saw a woman standing there. She was wearing white. Her long black hair completely covered her face. She walked right past me and disappeared into the wall. I was so terrified I just started praying right there on the spot. And then, the theater door suddenly flew open. Light poured in. I ran straight out, grabbed onto my dad's friend, and just broke down crying. Later, when we got home, I told my mom everything. Then she told me that when I disappeared, she just assumed I had already gone home and that she had left with my brothers. Anyway, this was years ago. That theater has been out of business for a long time now, just sitting there, abandoned. But even now, whenever I pass by it, I still get chills, and sometimes, without even realizing it, I find myself walking toward the entrance, like something is pulling me back inside. This happened right after college, when I had just rented a small apartment on my own. Like most people starting out, I didn't have much money, so I was looking for the cheapest place I could find. The apartment was really old, and there was this strange, musty smell that never seemed to go away, but but I didn't really have a choice. For the first few weeks, everything was fine, nothing unusual. But then, things started happening. One day, I was sitting on the toilet when suddenly, I couldn't breathe. It felt like the air was being sucked out of the room. I panicked and scrambled out of the bathroom, and the moment I got out, it stopped. I thought maybe there was something wrong with the ventilation, or maybe there just wasn't enough oxygen in there. But everything seemed normal, so I brushed it off, figuring maybe I was just stressed. But it kept happening, and it only ever happened when I was in the bathroom. One day, I was taking a shower when I suddenly heard a noise from the toilet. I turned around and saw the water inside it violently shaking, like someone had just stirred it. But I hadn't touched anything. There was no reason for it to move like that. That's when I started to feel really uneasy. There were days when the bathroom suddenly smelled like something burning, like squid being grilled. Other times, it smelled like blood or something rotting. And on those days, there would always be this sticky liquid on the floor. The toilet paper would be soaked for no reason, and sometimes there were splashes of water on the walls. At that point, I started to think something was seriously wrong with that bathroom, like it was cursed. So eventually, I asked around, found a psychic, and contacted him. A few days later, he came to my apartment. The moment he stepped into the bathroom, his expression changed, like he had just seen something terrible. Then he slowly looked down at the toilet. I followed his gaze, and the water inside had turned red. The psychic flushed it immediately. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I thought maybe I was hallucinating. But the psychic looked straight at me and nodded. After a moment, he told me that this apartment used to be a hideout for a criminal gang, and that in this bathroom there had been multiple cases of torture and murder. Right then, out of nowhere, he suddenly dropped to his knees and screamed,
Please, just let me go!
And then it was like something forced his head down into the toilet. In an instant, his face was shoved into the water. He started thrashing violently. I rushed over to help him, trying to pull him back, but his head felt impossibly heavy, like something was holding him down with incredible force. After struggling for what felt like forever, I finally managed to pull him out. He was coughing, gasping, clearly in pain. Then he told me he couldn't handle this alone, that he would have to bring his master to perform a proper exorcism, and that it would cost a lot. I'll be honest, part of me wondered if he was just trying to scam me, but after everything I had experienced, I didn't know what to think anymore. Even after he left, the strange things in the bathroom didn't stop. One day, while I was showering, I suddenly felt something slam into my ankle. I lost my balance and fell hard onto the floor. With the soap making everything slippery, I hit the tiles so hard. The pain was immediate and intense. I crawled out of the bathroom, still covered in soap, my whole body shaking. I was terrified. At that point, I couldn't stay there anymore. I moved out as soon as I could, basically running away from that place. I tried to look into what had happened in that apartment in the past, but I couldn't find anything. After I left, nothing like that ever happened to me again, and I hope it never will. Even now, I sometimes ask myself if what I experienced back then was real, or if it was all just in my head. But when I think back to what I saw with my own eyes, it's hard to convince myself it wasn't real. This happened during a summer when I was about 11 years old. I was at my father's house sitting on the couch in the living room. My dad worked a lot, so I was often home alone. I was casually watching movies when I saw my cat, Bubba, an American blue shorthair, sitting in the doorway of my dad's bedroom, staring at me through the holes of a nearby laundry basket. I called him over to me. That's when the real Bubba walked out from the kitchen entrance, meowing. My eyes immediately widened as I slowly looked at him, but the cat I thought was Bubba was still sitting in the bedroom doorway. I froze. Slowly, I lifted my blanket and held it up beside my left eye, blocking the other cat from view, not wanting to scare myself even more. I somehow managed to distract myself by going back to my movies until my dad got home at 6 p.m. That night, when I went to bed, I eventually fell into a light, uneasy sleep. I woke up at around 4 a.m. There was a figure standing in my doorway. It was staring at me through the small crack. I could only see part of its face. It was hard to tell if it was a man or a woman, but I assumed it was a man. One eye was open, almost unnaturally so, and yet the rest of its face was completely blank. I froze in place. Without even meaning to, I found myself mirroring its expression, just staring back at it. At first, I tried to make sense of it. I told myself it had to be my dad. Maybe he was just messing with me. So I tried to get a reaction. I made faces at it. Nothing. It didn't move. It didn't react. That's when something clicked. This didn't make sense. Why would my dad wake me up this early? And even if he did, he would never be able to keep a straight face for that long. That's when I realized that wasn't my dad. My eyes widened even more. Slowly and shaking, I reached for my phone without taking my eyes off it. I opened the camera and tried to take a picture, but the moment I lifted my phone to capture it, it was gone. Just like that. I slowly lowered my phone, trembling, trying to understand what I had just seen. Later that day, my sister, who was 17 at the time, came over. I didn't tell her anything about what happened. We spent the day watching movies together since we were home alone again. At one point, we watched our favorite ghost hunting show. That night, we both went to bed. The next day, my sister told me something that made my stomach drop. She said she had woken up at the exact same time, around 4 a.m., and she had seen a figure standing in the doorway. The same spot, the same expression. This time, it was staring at her. She said she stayed calm at first, thinking it was just her imagination, maybe influenced by the ghost show we watched earlier. But when I told her what I had seen the night before, she panicked. We told our dad, and to our surprise, he believed us, because he admitted he had experienced similar things in that house, but never told us. To this day, I'm 19 years old, and I'm still shaken by what happened. I try to explain it away. Maybe the cat was just laundry. Maybe the figure was just my brain playing tricks on me. But deep down, I know there's no logical explanation. I've never told any of my friends because I know they wouldn't believe me. It's always just stayed within my family. So yeah, this is my story of the copycat that still roams the house I live in. This is a true story, not about me, but about my two sisters. At the time, they were living together in a rented apartment. The building was actually quite nice, clean, peaceful, and in a quiet part of the city. Everything seemed normal. One sister was job hunting, the other was supposed to be in college that day, but a fever kept her home, and that's when the woman upstairs knocked. It was early afternoon when they heard a soft knock at the door. My elder sister answered it, and felt uneasy the moment she saw the woman standing outside. The woman was old, thin, with hollow cheeks. Her eyes were unreadable, and she stood unnaturally still.
My daughter is in the hospital,
She said slowly.
My phone isn't working. May I use yours to call her?
She held out a battered old mobile phone, something from another decade. It was clearly dead. Despite her instinct to shut the door, my elder sister hesitated. My younger sister, not sensing the same discomfort, invited the woman in. She sat down quietly, took the phone they handed her, and made a call. Someone answered. A woman's voice crackled through the speaker, soft and weak.
Hello?
The old woman began speaking calmly.
It's me. Are you okay? Are they taking care of you?
There were replies, faint and slow, but real. A woman's voice, low and distant, but undeniably there. After a few minutes, the old woman ended the call and handed back the phone. Then she looked at them, smiling faintly.
You should come up to my flat.
She said.
There's no one there. My daughter's in the hospital and my husband and son are both at work. I'll make you something nice to eat.
And with that, she turned and started climbing the stairs. Both sisters followed. They didn't know why. Maybe it was politeness, maybe pity, maybe something else entirely. But they found themselves walking up behind her. Then, when they were halfway up the stairs, the older sister suddenly grabbed the younger one's hand. "No," she whispered. "We're not going." They stopped. The spell broke. The old woman, now at the top, said nothing. She entered her flat and quietly closed the door. And as soon as she entered, they heard voices. Several men speaking, laughter, movement. But she had said she was alone. The next morning, when the maid came, they asked about the woman upstairs. The maid looked uneasy.
"She has no children,"
She said.
"Her husband died 10 years ago. She lives completely alone.
There was a pause.
She's known for strange things. People say she does black magic. Stay away from her."
That night, a storm rolled in. Wind slammed against the windows. Lightning lit up the sky. Around 2 a.m., one of the windows burst open. My elder sister got out of bed to close it and happened to glance up toward the apartment above. And there she was. The old woman was standing in her window, watching. In the middle of the storm, at exactly 2 a.m. She didn't blink. She didn't move. She just stood there, eyes locked on them as the lightning flashed behind her. The curtain was drawn instantly. She never returned, but something stayed. A feeling, a presence, a quiet weight that settled into the apartment, as if she never truly left, as if she was still watching. I used to work as a night security guard at a logistics warehouse on the outskirts of Phoenix. The job itself wasn't bad. It was mostly quiet. Truck drivers would come and go occasionally, and late-night cargo was about the extent of it. There were 3 buildings on site, connected by a long road with dim streetlights. My job was simple, sitting in the security booth, watching the CCTV, and patrolling every 2 to 3 hours. That night, I was alone. The other guard called in sick, so I was left to cover all 3 buildings on my own. Around 1:40 a.m., I was on patrol. I was on my way back to the truck after checking building number 2. Just then, the radio crackled and someone spoke. "I see you." A shiver ran down my spine. Since I was working alone, there was no one to radio me. I asked who it was. There was no answer. There was only one possibility. It meant someone was using a walkie-talkie in the office, which meant they were watching me via CCTV. I hid on the side of the building, a blind spot, where the CCTV couldn't capture me. I thought about what to do. I heard the radio again. "Where are you hiding?" I had no idea how he got onto the property. The entrance was clearly locked. Confused, I spoke into the radio. "You must not be here. If you do not leave immediately, I'll call the police." There was silence once again. A short while later, I heard the sound of a door opening and closing in the distance. Judging by the direction and distance, it was the security booth. I quickly got into a truck and headed toward the booth. Then, in the darkness, I saw the silhouette of someone standing in front of it. He ran toward the back of building number 1. I drove slowly toward the booth in the truck. A walkie-talkie lay on the ground. The door was open. I grabbed the baton from my belt and slowly stepped inside. Fortunately, there was no one there. However, I noticed something. A small box was sitting on the desk. There was no label on it, just a plain box. But something about it felt wrong, like I shouldn't touch it. I reached for my phone to call the police. That's when I heard something behind me. I froze, then I slowly turned around. A hand was sticking out from behind the door, and in that hand was a pistol, aimed right at me. Then I heard a man's voice say,
"Damn, you're already dead."
I froze on the spot. My heart started pounding as if it would burst. A moment later, the hand disappeared, and I ran over, closed the door, and locked it. Then I called the police. While waiting for them, I hid under the desk and trembled. Sometime later, the police arrived, but they couldn't find him. They searched the area, then turned their attention to the box on the desk. One of the officers opened it. Inside was a pistol and a note. It read,
"From now on, it's just you and me. A one-on-one gunfight. Let's see who survives in this warehouse before dawn."
The police searched the entire warehouse but couldn't find him. The only thing they found was a hole in the fence. I ended up quitting my job as a security guard that same day. I still don't know what that guy wanted from me, whether he really wanted to have a gunfight with me, or if it was just some kind of sick joke. It happened back in 2023. I was 18 years old at the time, living away from home for my studies in a small town. The place I rented was at the far corner of a small colony. It was a wide area surrounded by walls as a boundary, and the houses were arranged with 4 in each direction, forming a square. The middle area was open and empty, which we used for air drying clothes or sitting around with friends in the evenings who also rented rooms there. About the house, each one had 3 rooms and long porches connecting them. Behind our boundary, there were train tracks, so every time a train went by, it was very noisy, and our house used to shake a little. About my story, it happened at night. As usual, after eating dinner, I went to bed. Not wanting to study and feeling lazy, I used my phone for a while and then went to sleep. At some point, I started to wake up around 1 a.m., and I felt like my friend was sleeping beside me. Then I opened my eyes and looked at her, but she wasn't there. Fully awake now, I looked around for my friend, but I didn't see her anywhere. Then, I don't know why or what I was thinking, I checked under my bed to see if she was there, but she wasn't. I looked around my room. You see, my room wasn't big, it was small, with only my bed, a table, and a wooden Elmira without doors, so I would have seen her if she was there, but she wasn't. Then I thought maybe she went outside to sit with others, because I could hear some of our friends still outside on the porch due to the summer heat. Then I checked my windows and door, but everything was locked from the inside. I started to become really confused, thinking, how did she leave the room without opening the door? How was that possible? Then, dumbfounded, I sat back on my bed and started to think from the time I went to sleep to when I woke up. Then it hit me. There was no one there to begin with. I had gone to bed alone. It was my room. I didn't have a roommate. I felt so dumb. How could I get so confused? But the feeling of someone sleeping beside me was so real. I swear, I felt like we were sharing the same pillow, their head right beside mine. But then I brushed it off, thinking it was because in the past few nights, my sister had visited me and stayed over. After overthinking it for a while, I fell asleep. The next day, I went to my friends, saying good morning to everyone and asking how late they stayed outside. Then I shared my weird experience from the night before, joking that my brain had played a game on me. Then 2 of them looked at me and one said,
I don't think it's just your brain playing tricks on you. I had the same experience a few nights ago. There was someone sleeping beside me.
She shared that it wasn't her roommate because her roommate was back home at the time. But unlike me, she actually saw someone lying right beside her. She was terrified and didn't want to look at them directly, so she closed her eyes and pulled the covers over herself. I felt scared, and after that experience, I started keeping my Holy Bible beside me and prayed before going to sleep to feel safe and protected. I was so glad it was my first and last experience of something so weird. I hope it never returns again, but sometimes I still wonder what it was. Was it just my brain confusing me, or something entirely paranormal? I grew up in a small town in Pennsylvania. There was only one small theater in our neighborhood, and people just called it the theater. It wasn't really a professional theater. It was more like a high school auditorium that had been slightly decorated. That night, I went with 2 friends to see a play put on by a local theater group. Honestly, I didn't expect much from the show. I just went because I had nothing else to do and the tickets were cheap. But about 20 minutes into the play, someone in the back row kicked my seat hard. At first, I didn't turn around. I figured it might have been an accident. But after a while, they kicked me again. This time, it was harder, hard enough to shake my seat. I turned around. A hulking man was staring straight at me. He was completely expressionless. There was not a single expression on his face. Usually, if someone accidentally kicks a seat, they would make an apologetic face or say something, but he just stared at me without saying a word. I was a little annoyed, but not wanting to cause trouble unnecessarily, I decided to focus on the play again. However, shortly after, he kicked my seat again, and I didn't know what to do about the situation. It was still a long time before the play ended, and since I couldn't strike up a conversation with him, I was at a loss. I silently mouthed to him, "Is something wrong?" He stared at me for a moment, then slowly nodded. Anxiety rose deep from within my chest. A moment later, he pointed his finger toward his foot. My gaze dropped, and the moment I saw his foot, I was horrified. A knife was hidden inside his shoe and pants. Then, he quietly put his finger to his mouth and gestured for me to stay quiet. There were an enormous number of scars on his hands. It even looked like there was blood on them, so I realized he wasn't just playing a prank. I couldn't understand what I had done wrong to deserve this man threatening me like this. At the same time, the play I was watching was a thriller, so my anxiety was through the roof. There were scenes in the middle of the play where the lights would suddenly go out and create a terrifying atmosphere. Then, suddenly, the lights went out again, and there was a moment when I couldn't see anything in front of me. The audience screamed with joy and excitement. At that moment, I felt something cold touch the back of my neck, and I screamed. A moment later, when the lights came back on, I turned around and saw the man touching his pants. I realized he had taken out his knife, held it to my neck, and was hiding it back in his pants. I couldn't sit there any longer. My body began to tremble. I whispered to my friends that I was leaving and went outside. My friends looked at me with bewildered expressions. Once outside, I texted them that I was going home. I was terrified that the crazy man would chase me, so I ran like crazy out of the theater. I quickly got into my car, locked the doors, and texted my friends to come out as fast as they could. A short while later, my friends left the venue and got into my car, complaining about what was wrong. I briefly explained the situation to them and drove off. That is when I saw the man standing at the entrance of the venue. He lifted his t-shirt and several knives were hanging from his belt. I couldn't tell clearly from a distance, but the knives looked brown, though I couldn't tell if they were rusty or what. He pulled out the longest one and aimed it at me. It was a large knife that looked about 12 inches long. It felt incredibly ominous. I rushed home and never went near that venue again. I have a feeling that the man didn't only do that to me. Of course, it could have been a simple prank, but looking at the numerous scars on his hands, it certainly cannot be considered a joke. My name is Ayana. I'm 17 years old now, but this occurred when I was 7. We had just moved to a new state. Everything felt off. The streets, the buildings, even the silence had a weight to it. My mom, let's call her Yvonne, was always waiting for me at the bus stop after school, no matter what. It was our routine, comforting and safe. But this day was different. The bus slowed to a stop, the door creaked open, and I stepped off alone. No mom, no familiar face. The wind was sharp, almost whispering, and the sun was just low enough to stretch shadows across the cracked pavement. I looked both ways, empty, not a single soul. I stood frozen, heart pounding. I remember thinking, where is she? My tiny fingers clutched my backpack as I took slow steps toward the gas station a few blocks away, the only place I recognized. That's when I saw him. Across the street, a man, just standing there. He hadn't been there before, I swear it. One moment, the sidewalk was empty. The next, he was there, like he had risen out of the shadows. His clothes were dark, his face hard to make out, but I could feel his eyes on me, unmoving, watching. He didn't blink, didn't speak, didn't take a single step. Every hair on my body stood up. My instincts screamed, run. So I did. I sprinted toward the gas station, lungs burning, eyes stinging from fear. My legs moved on autopilot. All I could think was, don't let him follow, don't look back. Inside the gas station, I found a corner and dropped to the floor. I pretended to cry, not because I wanted attention, but because I was too afraid to ask for help. 3 older women were nearby. I hoped they'd come over, and they did. They asked questions. Where's your mom? Where do you live? But I didn't have answers. We had just moved. All the buildings looked the same. They were about to take me to the police when a car screeched to a stop outside. It was an Uber, and my mom jumped out, tears already falling from her face. She ran in and grabbed me like she thought she'd never see me again. That night, she told me the truth. She had a job interview and got stuck in traffic. When she finally arrived at the bus stop, I wasn't there. She panicked. She looked everywhere. Then a man, that man, appeared across the street. He pointed and said,
She ran towards the gas station.
That's it, just that one line. My mom looked up to thank him, but he was gone. Not walking away, not turning a corner, just gone. To this day, we don't know who he was, but I remember what I felt when I saw him, and I'm not sure if he was trying to help me, or watching me, or something else.